Later this month, on October 21st, South Korea will launch its first homegrown satellite launch vehicle, the Nuri. It will make its maiden journey into space from the NATO Space Center in Goheung, South Jeollado Province, and if all goes according to plan, South Korea will become the 7th country in the world to possess independent capabilities, launch an over 1-ton satellite into orbit from its own soil. It's the big buzz generator at home, but ahead of its highly anticipated launch, we got curious about the key technology that had spent the last decade in development and the bigger picture question. What are South Korea's space ambitions anyway? To provide us with a better understanding on this topic, we're joined by the SpaceNews Korea correspondent, Mr. Si-soo Park. He's an award-winning journalist who has over 14 years of working with English media domestically, as well as internationally. Mr. Park is also an author of 2 books on learning English as a native Korean and a YouTuber. You wear many hats, Mr. Mr. Park. And thank you for returning to Arirang Radio.
Thank you for having me.
You know, the last time we crossed paths on Arirang Radio, you had a different job.
Yeah, right.
I do wonder how you ended up at SpaceNews of all places. I know it's the hot commodity, but what's been your journey the last 10 years?
Yeah, actually, I joined the Space News just 1 year ago. Before telling about myself, I want to tell about the Space News itself. And the Space News is a American news outlet, online outlet, and magazine publisher specialized in space issues. And I'm a Seoul correspondent covering space policy and industry here in South Korea and Asia as a whole.
Right. Was this a strategic move for you to end up covering space news of all the things that you can specialize in?
Yeah, sure. Actually, moving to this space news was kind of a strategic decision I made after working 14 years at a general newspaper in Korea. In general newspaper, I was used to rotate one bit to another every 2 or 3 years. And one day I realized that I couldn't find the field or segment in which I can be burst in. So that was something I find myself a problem with myself. So I decided to move to a segment I can be burst in, I can be specialized in, and then all this year came a space issue emerged in the U.S.
Right,
and
the
then,
idea of you in space tourism for regular folks
right.
like me.
Yeah, right. And then I grabbed it, and that's what it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad you found your expertise because it's right in line and right in schedule for such a timely topic for South Koreans. Just in case our listeners are not all caught up, can you tell them about the latest launch, the Nuri, set for later this month?
Yeah, before telling about the launch itself, I want to give you a brief introduction of Nuri, or KSLV Sakun. Nuri is a Korean name, and internationally the rocket is known as a KSLV Sakun. KSLV stands for Korea Space Launch Vehicle. Yeah, and you may wonder why Sakun, because the South Korea had the KSLV-1 back in 2013.
The Naro?
Yes, that's NATO in Korea. And there was a 2-stage rocket, and it was successfully launched and 5 meters wide, its weight is 200 tons. So when everything is loaded, like a fuel and everything, a satellite, every devices are loaded, is up to 200 tons. And it's used fuel, kerosene, which is similar to jet fuel.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's capable of delivering up to 1.5 tons of payload to 600 to 800 kilometers above our heads. This is an area we called it low Earth orbit.
Okay.
Yeah. This is basically the specification of the Nuri, or KSLV-2. And let me explain how things will unfold on the launch date.
All right.
According to the government and science ministry, it will launch from NATO Space Center, as you mentioned, and in the morning of the launch date, the rocket will transport to the launch pad on a giant non-vibration transporter, and then will erect it vertically on the launch pad and get fueled. And then the weather checking will be started, and at a 3 ground station, one in Nauru Space Center and another one in Jeju Island and another one in Palau.
Okay.
And if everything goes accordingly, the launch countdown will begin. Once the rocket lifts up, it will lift up vertically and twist its position towards south to fly through an approved narrow pathway between Jeju Island and Japan.
It sounds impressive, right? And that's a pretty key part of the launch and the journey itself, right?
Yeah. This is very beginning part of the journey toward this space.
Right.
Yeah. The first stage is 4 powerful engines, each weighing 75 tons. It's burning for 127 seconds to put the rocket at 59 kilometers high.
Okay.
And the speed of 24,840 kilometers per hour.
From a regular listener's perspective, I have no idea how to compare or how to even begin to compare from the speed that I understand.
So I bring an example how to feel the speed itself.
Please.
At the speed 24,840 kilometers per hour is you can travel at this speed, travel around the globe just in 1.5 hours.
Around the entire globe, you said. Sounds like quite a trip.
But it's not over. There's more speed we need to go through because here is a scientific term, escape velocity.
What's that?
This is a minimum speed at which required for a rocket to break through the Earth's atmosphere and move into the space.
And move into space. All right.
That is the 11.2 kilometers per second.
Okay.
That's huge. That's great fast. And that's approximately 33 times the speed of sound.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing in these comparisons because without it doesn't make much sense to most of our listeners. All right. So that in itself is a pretty impressive part of this technology and the maiden journey.
The core part of the rocket.
All right.
So, as I mentioned, the first stage will burn for 127 seconds to put the rocket at 55 kilometers high. And the first stage will separate it from the other body. And then second, the boost to the ignition of the second stage engine will begin. And then second stage will ignition for 106 seconds to put the rocket at 258 kilometers high.
Okay.
Yeah. And then payload fairing will be jettisoned. And then while the second stage burning continue. And the second stage burning will end at, as I mentioned, 258 kilometers high and the third engine ignition to begin. And to put the rocket at the final destination, which is the 700 kilometers high. And then the rocket releases the payload. And this time the payload is not real satellite, it's a satellite mock-up.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, because this time is the flight is the demonstration flight, not real one. Just like a demonstration technology applied to this rocket.
So why would we attach an expensive satellite to essentially a rehearsal then, a run through?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. The whole process from liftoff, from reaching the target orbit will take 967 seconds or 16 minutes and 11 seconds.
Okay.
That's a short period of time.
I was going to say, it's a lot of hoopla for a very brief journey, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
sure. Just a 60 minutes, but there are many things happening between them.
Of course.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to ask you a pretty loaded question, and I feel like this is what most of our listeners might be curious about. From what I can understand as just someone who's following the story with no deep knowledge of the industry, these space projects are notoriously expensive, right? Yeah. And I do wonder, given the timing with the pandemic and all of it, what is South Korea's motivation for being so determined to make this a success?
From my perspective, number one motivation was to have South Korea's own capability to launch satellite.
That's important, right?
Yeah, because so far we have fully relied on the following launchers to send our satellite. So the first motivation I mentioned was the having our own capability itself is quite critical, because think about that the space issue is not just a domestic issue. This is an international issue. We can see SpaceX or many other space companies. The U.S., China is launching rocket numerous times every single year. And last year, I remember more than 100th time launch took place last year alone. Because this is a global race. We need, if we do nothing, we'll fall behind.
Even further behind.
Sure. So we have to do that. So the problem is, as you mentioned, it costs a lot.
Yeah.
So we need to have our own reason why I need to pursue this project. But as I mentioned, this is international race. So if we do nothing, we'll fall back further.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be a simultaneous priority.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. So in this regard, having our own technical capability to launch our satellite anytime, anywhere is number one motivation. Why we need to pursue this space project.
Is there other reasons that you find interesting as to why we are pursuing as a nation this effort to launch our own satellite with our own technology?
Of course, there's also economic reason. Yeah, because this space economy is quite expanding very fast. There's statistic there's a projection that the space economy will grow exponentially over the next decade. So there's many field of industry that can take advantage from the space technology. For example, mobile communication. Now we are using. Now in Korea, which is very well connected country, we feel no problem with connecting to each other using a mobile phone. But for example, think about the very remote area or the mountainous area. You may have the experience of not being connected to the mobile signal. And for example, North Pole, South Pole, desert, everything. This is still not connected to the other part of the world. So if the satellite is launched and we can get connected to each other via the satellite, it's a kind of opening a new area where we can get connected.
For maybe business, for connectivity in general. What that may imply is because with more communication expanded, it can open up this sort of blue ocean of untapped territory, essentially. All right, I can see the economic benefits of this, because without this context, I was questioning what is the point of this at this point in time. It's been in the works for 10 years, from what I understand. All right. Before we went on air, you did mention that the possibility of everything going smoothly on any space exploration projects, private or public, we run a lot of risks, right? What can we expect once this launch is a success in South Korea? That's actually a pretty big point, right?
Yeah,
Is there a possibility that it could also not go as scheduled or accordingly?
Yeah, sure, of course. There's a saying, this popular saying in the space sector, space community, that is, space is hard. Yeah.
It's so short, but it's I get it.
It refers to the difficulty to realize the space technology. So I would like to say, don't be too much optimistic about the success of upcoming launch, because according to government data, there were over nearly 1,000 launch attempts over the past decade. And the failure rate was around 6%. Yeah, that means 6 out of 100 launch were failed.
That's a little too high, isn't it?
It can be delayed. And as we talked about earlier, this part of the interview, the wind could be a big factor, and there's many other factors that can affect the launch event. So depending on what is happening on the launch date, the launch can be delayed, called up in the last minute of the countdown, and even failed, explode, blow up in the middle air. It's always, everything is possible. But one thing I would like to highlight is that it doesn't mean our technology applied to the KSFO2 is not good. Failure is common.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I would like to highlight. Yeah.
Space is hard, and therefore failure is common in these launches. So we should consider that in reporting these stories. I think that's really important.
Yeah, sure. And then the NATO, the KSFO1, launched back in 2013. it succeeded after 2 failure.
I remember the 2 failed attempts.
Yeah, first one was because of problem with the fairing, and the second time was exploded while ascending due to internal fault. So once again, the space is hard and failure is common.
All right. I'll try to, kind of engrave that in my mind because based on these headlines, I think we get really excited and hyped up. And when the launch doesn't happen successfully, I think the public does get a little disappointed or confused and maybe even questioning the technology, which is something that we shouldn't be doing anyhow.
Don't be disappointed.
Yeah.
That's common.
All right. I like that. I feel like that's the quote of the day for us today. Here's another angle that I want to ask you before we let you go. As a space watcher and someone who has been specializing in this industry for now a year, what do you think of the private space flights that have been taking place recently? That is the target to, of course, strengthen the space tourism industry.
Yeah, right. Actually, I think it's a great achievement. You know what? It was a dreams come true moment for many of us, including me and probably Lina and you.
Frankly speaking, because at first I thought, Elon Musk, he always marches to the beat of his own drum. He's kind of extraordinary like that. Right. And a lot of these billionaires have that in common, right? They dream extraordinarily big. And I didn't even realize this was an option until it happened.
Yeah, right.
All within this year. All these competitors saying, I did it first, we did it faster, and these competitions. Right. It's exhilarating, but you also see it as a positive thing.
Sure. Before answering that, let me ask you a question. If you are rich enough...
Loaded with money.
Yeah. Would you willing to buy a ticket for space tourism?
Oh, can I be like the next generation tourist? Not the first try. I just don't think I'm brave enough, Mr. Park. Would you?
I hope so. If I'm rich enough.
Yeah, you would take that. You would have taken that.
I'll feel the microgravity environment. I want to feel how I can move and what kind of feeling I will have in the zero gravity situation. So, yeah.
Maybe this is why, Mr. Park, you have your specialty and I have mine. It sounds terrifying to me. All right. So to answer that final question, so you see it as a positive move that, people are excited about this potential that the space tourism industry has?
Yeah. Actually, as I mentioned, it was great achievement and dreams come true moment for everybody. And not everybody, many of us, including me. But my position, actually, frankly speaking, my position to this space tourism is that I'm not too much optimistic positive about it. I mean, there's a many top priority above the space tourism. With such an advanced technology and huge budget, there's many issues we need to tackle instead of the space tourism. Space tourism, as I mentioned, is kind of joyriding event for the rich, super rich.
The super rich or the super lucky.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And there's many other things like climate change and the poverty, global poverty. There's many urgent issues we need to tackle globally with the global effort. But so my position is that space tourism is a great achievement. That's true. But if I were the decision maker, I would put that resources that is now being used for the tourism into other issues to tackle the global crisis. Like
poverty, you said.
Yeah, sure.
How would you connect those two worlds?
For example, let me give you an example of climate change. We can help tackle the climate change with the space technology. For example, now we are struggling to find the resources where air pollution resources come from. But if you look the situation from the space, it's quite easy to figure out where the main sources come from. Like satellite imaging and satellite monitoring, we can figure out where the main source of air pollution. So this is one of the example, and then there's many other issues. Like we can using the space technology, we can tackle. The space technology can be applied to the self-driving technology and autonomous agriculture and sea monitoring, water monitoring, the sea level. We can monitor which side is more dangerous than the other part. There's many other segments we can make a good solution with space technology. So So if I were decision maker, I would put the resources now being used in the space tourism into other segment that would be good for everybody.
Mr. Park, I feel like that's an opinion piece waiting to be written. I feel the passion. Use these resources, really expensive ones at that, for the betterment of, well, mankind and our survival.
So recently, the UN Secretary General recently criticized billionaires for what he called joyriding to space. Yeah.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for now. This was an exciting conversation. Thank you so much for coming in. It's been a pleasure. We hope to connect with you again in the future.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.